Trent Reznor is most famously known for being the frontman and core contributor of the world-renowned rock group 9-Inch Nails. Generally associated with dark sound and imagery, Reznor's work has a unique style that has resulted in 13 Grammy nominations and the sale of over 20 million records. Though he reached great success in the early years of 9-Inch Nails, Trent was not someone who dealt with the pressures of fame in a positive manner.
At the time when fame presented itself to me, I was not at a point in my own life where I was equipped to deal with it in any way.
I'm not really comfortable with any of the celebrity that goes along with just playing music, so I try to avoid it, and I don't. Not to be difficult, I just don't enjoy, that sort of thing.
And I had a built-in sense of not being good enough that I've carried with me from whatever it's come from. And an easy way to fit in was to self-medicate, and after a while, self-medication started to stifle anything creative or good that I had, including my ability to even like myself. And that led itself to a place where I had to get better. I hated who I'd become.
A pivotal moment in Trent's life was coming to terms with his addictions. During the tour for the album Downward Spiral, Trent's life became more and more of an accurate representation of the album name itself. It took Trent reaching rock bottom for him to come to terms with what was needed to turn his life around and create great pieces of music once again.
We started as a medium-sized band in America. When we ended up, we were a big band. And I really didn't, my head was spinning when I got off that tour, and I allowed some external forces to kind of shape my own personality, and I became something I said I never would be. I turned into someone I didn't like that much. Pretty bad place, actually, like emotionally and spiritually, where I was really just genuinely unhappy. And I've realized that as an artist, I have to draw upon a place where I have to examine myself and really try to understand why I feel the way I do about certain things, and have the courage to look into that mirror and see it. And now, in retrospect, I look back to that time and I realized the last thing I wanted to do was do that. The last person I wanted to spend time with was myself at that time. So I did anything that made me think I was busy, but I wasn't really addressing the situation. It took me getting to a place of being at the bottom and really having the courage to face myself and say, you got everything you ever want in life, and you're miserable. And that made me feel worse because I had no excuses. I got everything I ever dreamed I'd ever get, because I never thought I'd get it. I got it.
It makes sense that some of his most well-known songs are his darkest. But what are his thoughts on creating from a place of emotional darkness? And what is his preferred state of mind while writing music?
If you'd asked me that question, what state of mind produces my best work? 10 years ago, I would have said pain and despair and desperation and aggravation. And given the choice to punch a wall or write a song, I'd have to be in that mindset to get something out that mattered, or utter defeat, or one of those things was the motivation to channel that energy into something that might be considered positive instead of self-destructive. Not being in that place allows me to think a lot more clearly about things than I could if I have to be in that place to write. And much like every other role that drugs or alcohol played in my life, I realized that also was more hindering than it was freeing. And then a lot of that was a lie and a cheap way to get to some place that wasn't real anyway. And I can function much better creatively as well as, in life in general.
Now that we've heard how sobriety has affected his songwriting, it makes me curious if he has the same outlook when it comes to performing.
Were you also at all nervous about, going back and performing, being clean?
Yeah, my last times I played, the last year of touring in 2000 was being sick every single day and lying to myself and living in this terrifying world of being physically addicted to something. If I didn't have a drink before I went on, I'd get sick, and it was just terrible. That was soul-crushing year, facing, just bad time. And I gotta admit, the day of the first show, I woke up nervous, and it wasn't like I want to go have a drink. It was just like, I hope I don't feel that way before I go on stage, And I didn't, I went on and it was a great show, and the next day I kind of thought about it, but not really, and then I didn't even think about it. It just became how I remember it being before that last year of touring. It was something to look forward to, and it's fun playing live, and it's great to look out and know that I can't wait to play these songs for you, and I'm not dying on stage while I'm doing it.
Following his addiction, it's no surprise Trent would take the opportunity of a new album to reflect on darker times with his next song, With Teeth. Rather than explaining the meaning of the lyrics, he thinks it's important for people to draw their own conclusions of his work.
I don't really like to get into lyrics and what they're about that much, just because I think it kind of doesn't really matter. To me, what's always been the songs that have meant the most to me, they're what I think they're about, and it's always better than what the guy that wrote it's about, or when you mishear a lyric and the one that you've thought you've heard is better than the real one when you finally see it. Like, books are better than movies because you design it to set you the way you want it to look, and I don't like to have my personality or what I'm up to outside this room or overshadow what I think the most important thing is, which is, to me, the music.
And his music has stood for itself in a profound way. But why exactly is it that tens of millions of people have resonated so immensely with it? I believe it's the sense of sincerity held in his work. Each song is an accurate reflection of who he is in the moment of its creation.
When I've sat down to write, I've always tried to have the main criteria just be to be honest with myself about how I feel about whatever it is that I happen to be writing about. And try to be as brutally honest and not cater to anything other than what excites me as an artist and as a person. And, as long as it feels valid to me and feels sincere, I would hate to think I would ever be in a position where I'm faking it to get a paycheck. It's been 4.5 years since we've toured or I've been on stage. And a big question for me was wondering if this is going to still seem valid and relevant. As of right now, we've played a handful of shows that went as good as I could have hoped. It felt real on stage. I don't feel like I'm playing a role of someone I used to be. It feels relevant. It feels valid. I'm very happy to say that it feels that way. Not that I would sit here and say that it doesn't feel that way, but I'm telling you the truth, and it does. Believe me, it does.
Years ago, when I did the music that was going to be Pretty Hate Machine, I'd always wanted to be in a band. I thought I wanted to do this, and when I finally had the courage to sit down and try to write music, first I just tried to write lyrics just to have lyrics to put in a song. It didn't mean anything, and they were bad. And it wasn't until I had the courage to I realized I was keeping a journal of things that I wouldn't show anybody and things I wasn't really proud to feel, but I had to get it out somehow. And so when I incorporated them into a few songs, and I realized that I'd struck something that made me feel better to get it out, and it had an honesty and an integrity to it that I think can only come from meaning something instead of pretending that you're a character doing something. So I kind of used that as the framework for 9 Inch Nails, where every record I've done really expresses where my head's been at when I've done it. I think it has a truthfulness to it and an integrity or sincerity that I think that's where it's going. I know that, now I'm faced with some, hey, The Fragile doesn't sound like Downward Spiral. In America, it hasn't sold as well as Downward Spiral did. No, did you think it's a failure? No, I don't. It reflects where I've been when I did it, and that's the record I had to make and very proud of.
When I think of honesty in lyrics, I think of his 1994 song Hurt. Perhaps the thoughtful integrity Trent poured into this song is the reason Johnny Cash created the well-known cover towards the end of his life.
The whole Johnny Cash thing came up at a time right when I was about to start writing this record, and I was kind of technically in my time off phase, but what was going through my head was really questioning my own relevance, and I was wondering if I had anything to say or if I was any good, and just kind of really thinking about those things. And Rick Rubin, who's a good friend of mine, called me up and asked me how I'd feel about Johnny Cash covering Hurt. And I was flattered. Okay, great. And I think I kind of assumed it would be one of 100 songs they might try for an album. And then a while later, I got a CD in the mail. It surprised me that I felt a bit kind of invaded, like his voice was in my song, and it sounded funny to me. I wasn't in the mood to really listen. I was doing something else. And then not long after that, I got the video in the mail from Mark Romanek, and that's when everything kind of goosebumps, wet eyes. You know what I mean? I couldn't believe how emotionally powerful that video was, and how that Johnny Cash could juxtapose his life against my words in that song, and just felt incredibly powerful, and just felt really privileged to be involved in that in whatever abstract way that I was, and sad that it became the context in his life, and which context it ended up becoming at the end of his life. But it's a very flattering situation to have somebody that's such an immense talent and icon as him, and great songwriter, asked to sing your song, and then him turning it into this thing that really beautiful. And it felt like it felt really, at the time, it felt really comforting and like a pat on the back in a way of like, you can do this, get out there and write an album. And it felt good to me. I'm very flattered to be involved in it.
There's no doubt Johnny Cash's version of Hurt has an element of authenticity to it, and that this was important to Trent. However, Trent felt a loss of this essential authenticity in rock and roll music as the early 2000s approached.
I mean, generally through the history of rock, what's been good about it is the rebelliousness and the anti-establishment and the rule breaking and the lack of political correctness, perhaps. And I think people want excitement and danger. And if you look at the rock bands out now, I don't see much of that. It's been sucked into the pop world. Personally, I find a sense of lack of sincerity, a bit of posturing. And that's what bands that I find that I like, I inherently have a sense that they mean it, and that matters to me. If I think somebody's just following the trend because that's what you do today, I can sound full of myself, but I can tell you that I'm glad to make money doing this, but I'm doing it because I love music, and this is what I would do anyway. And if I had to work at McDonald's to make music at night, that's what I would do. But I think a lot of people now are doing music just to make money and trying to hoodwink people into believing that there's some sincerity there. That's just my opinion on it.
Yeah.
But I think when you're in a climate where you're much more congratulated on your business sense than you are your talent, that something's not quite right with the scene right now.
Well, you're seeing it in a lot of different arts too, where it's like really broad caricatures of very, very generalized things, a sort of pablumized, homogenized type of art. And I wonder sometimes, is that what people want, or is that what they're merely given?
Well, I think to a degree people will absorb what they're spoon-fed, and if you look at playlists and radios and videos now, it's apparent that people are buying what they're told to buy. But I do think there's a contingent of people out there that demand more from their art and want to get a greater meaning or depth, or want to read lyrics and think about it, or wonder what thought went into it, and then not treat music as just disposable crap that you buy on a little plastic thing and throw out when you're sick of it.
To me, rock music was never meant to be safe. I think there needs to be an element of intrigue, mystery, subversiveness. Your parents should hate it. And over 30 years after the founding of 9 Inch Nails, Trent continues to push the boundaries of rock music to the present day.